corta edad. 28 años, fui pobre y me transporté en buses.
Y lo asesinaron.
In the shadow of the Andes Mountains lies Medellin, Colombia, a city of contrasts. Today, it's a hub of innovation, its streets humming with metro cables and digital startups. But 3 decades ago, it was the epicenter of a global nightmare, ruled by a man whose name still divides a nation, Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria. To understand Escobar is to confront a paradox. He was a man who donated millions to build schools and soccer fields while orchestrating the murders of judges, journalists, and children. A man who claimed to fight for the poor yet lived in palaces while his country drowned in blood. This documentary isn't just about Escobar. It's about the myths we believe, the systems that fail us, and the human cost of conflating a monster with a martyr. Why does the myth of Robin Hood persist? Because it's easier to romanticize a villain than to confront the uncomfortable truth. Escobar's empire was built on the bones of the very people he claimed to protect. Over the next hour, we'll unravel his story, not through the lens of infamy, but through the eyes of those who lived it. Survivors, investigators, and historians will guide us through the labyrinth of his crimes, the complicity of governments, and the scars that still haunt Colombia.
Muchos de estos narcotraficantes tienen altos niveles de megalomanía, quieren ser queridos, apreciados, respetados y temidos. Y pues qué mejor lugar para eso que la política.
From grave robber to billionaire. Pablo Escobar was born on December 1st, 1949, in Rio Negro, a rural town in Colombia's Antioquia region. His father, Abel de Jesus Darii Escobar, was a farmer. His mother, Humilda Gaviria, a schoolteacher. The family was neither destitute nor wealthy, but young Pablo chafed at their modest life. Friends recall a boy obsessed with status, vowing to own a Rolls-Royce by age 22. By his teens, Escobar's ambition outpaced legality. He sold counterfeit diplomas, smuggled stereo equipment, and even stole tombstones to sand off inscriptions and resell them, a macabre foreshadowing of his disregard for human dignity. But his true ascent began in the 1970s when Colombia's cocaine trade exploded. Cocaine was Escobar's lottery ticket.
Bueno, local, pero también a nivel mundial, porque Colombia se convirtió en el principal proveedor de cocaína a nivel mundial, sobre todo al país consumidor más importante que era Estados Unidos.
Initially, he worked as a smuggler, transporting drugs via small planes and speedboats. But by 1976, he'd founded the Medellín Cartel, a syndicate that would dominate 80% of the global cocaine market. His strategy was ruthless: bribe or kill anyone in his path. By the 1980s, Escobar's empire raked in $420 million weekly. He bought fleets of submarines to ship drugs, commissioned labs hidden in jungles, and even built a private zoo with giraffes and hippos. Yet in Medellin's slums, he cultivated a different image. He built entire neighborhoods like Barrio Pablo Escobar, donating houses to the homeless. He financed churches, hospitals, and annual Christmas giveaways where poor families received appliances and toys. To outsiders, it seemed altruistic, but locals knew the truth. These were bribes, not gifts. As one resident later confessed, if you criticized him, your family disappeared. His charity was a leash. Escobar's duality became his armor. To the world, he posed as a businessman, even winning a seat in Colombia's Congress in 1982. But behind closed doors, he plotted assassinations, bombings, and a war against the state that would claim thousands of lives. Former associate of Escobar. He started small, selling fake lottery tickets, stealing tombstones. But cocaine? That was his golden ticket. By the 1980s, he controlled 80% of the global cocaine trade. A nation under siege. By the mid-1980s, Escobar's cartel wasn't just a criminal enterprise. It was a parallel government. His private army, Los Priscos, numbered over 1,000 hitmen. Judges who refused bribes were executed in broad daylight. Police stations were bombed. Journalists received grenades in the mail. In 1984, Escobar crossed a line. When Justice Minister Rodrigo Lara Bonilla, a vocal critic, pushed for his extradition to the U.S., Escobar had him assassinated.
Rodrigo Lara vivía al norte de la ciudad. Iba para su casa. Recuerdo que el ministro no se movilizaba en un carro blindado, su escolta era muy precaria y realmente la vulnerabilidad era total. Y en el trayecto de su oficina a la casa aparecieron unos sicarios en motocicleta y lo asesinaron.
Lara's murder marked a turning point. Colombia's government, long riddled with cartel bribes, finally declared war. The U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, joined the fight, forming the Bloque de Búsqueda, a joint task force of elite commandos. But Escobar fought back with psychological warfare. He offered $2,000 for every dead police officer, leading to the killings of over 600 officers in Medellin alone. Corpses were dumped with signs, "For every extradition, 10 judges will die." Corruption, however, remained Escobar's greatest weapon. He paid informants inside police stations, courts, and even the presidential palace. Raids were routinely sabotaged. Evidence vanished. In 1989, a bomb he ordered destroyed Avianca Flight 203.
An explosive device detonates,
Killing 110 people, including 2 Americans.
More than 100 people have been killed in a plane crash near the Colombian capital, Bogotá. The plane, an Avianca Airlines Boeing 727, was on a domestic flight to Cali.
The target? A presidential candidate who dared oppose him. The U.S. labeled him a terrorist. Colombia offered a 10 million peso reward. Yet Escobar evaded capture for years, hiding in plain sight. His secret? A network of safe houses, paid-off officials, and a population too terrified or too indebted to betray him. The human cost. Behind Escobar's billions were faces, thousands of them, ordinary Colombians caught in the crossfire of his war. Take Dora Castañeda, a 34-year-old teacher killed in the 1989 bombing of the DAS building. She'd gone to renew her passport. Or Luis Carlos Molina, a 15-year-old street vendor executed for accidentally witnessing a cartel meeting. Escobar's victims weren't just rivals. They were collateral damage in his quest for power. And then there were the silenced. Journalists like Guillermo Cano, editor of El Espectador, murdered for exposing Escobar's crimes. Judges like Tulio Manuel Castro Gil, blown up in his car after ruling against the cartel. Even Escobar's allies weren't safe. Carlos later, a cartel co-founder, fled after Escobar ordered his assassination for questioning his leadership. But perhaps the most haunting victims were the innocent. In 1989, Escobar ordered a car bomb outside a Bogotá shopping mall, killing 107 people and injuring 200.
Every person he wanted to kill, he killed. He was not able to protect anyone.
Among the dead was a 6-year-old girl, Natalia Pineda, who'd begged her mother for ice cream. Her mother, Clara, recalls the moment. "I held her hand, then heard the explosion. When I woke up, she was gone. Escobar didn't just kill my daughter, he killed the future."
Peppers were formed because people knew that this guy was out of control.
These weren't casualties. They were acts of terrorism, designed to paralyze a nation with fear. Corruption and complicity. Escobar didn't rise to power in a vacuum. He thrived in a broken system, a nation where poverty, corruption, and inequality collided. In the 1980s, Colombia's government was a patchwork of competing interests.
Además, soy un visitante asiduo.
Politicians took cartel bribes to fund campaigns. Police officers earned $100 a month, making Escobar's silver or lead offer irresistible. Even the U.S. prioritized Cold War alliances over drug enforcement, funneling aid to anti-communist groups linked to cartels. Escobar exploited this chaos. In 1982, he won a seat in Colombia's Congress as an alternate deputy, using his position to block extradition laws. He posed as a man of the people, railing against Yankee imperialism. But his true goal was clear: immunity. When extradition threats loomed, Escobar launched Los Extraditables, a terrorist wing that bombed courts, newspapers, and the presidential palace.
As well as 11 of the 24 Supreme Court justices.
In 1991, Colombia's government capitulated, rewriting the constitution to ban extraditions. Escobar surrendered, but on his terms. His prison, La Catedral, was a hilltop mansion with a soccer field, jacuzzi, and disco. From there, he continued running his empire, ordering hits and managing shipments. When officials finally raided it in 1992, he escaped, humiliating the state.
He said, I will surrender, but I will surrender to a prison that I select. And by the way, I'll build it. I will handpick all my fellow prisoners. I will select the guard force. And the Colombian National Police are not allowed to come within 2 miles of my prison. And what did the government of Colombia say? Okay.
The message was clear. Escobar wasn't just a criminal. He was a symptom of a system that prioritized power over justice. The mind of a narcissist. What drives a man to commit such atrocities? Psychologists who've studied Escobar point to malignant narcissism, a toxic mix of grandiosity, entitlement, and a chilling lack of empathy. He wept at operas, doted on his children, and donated to the church, yet ordered the deaths of thousands. As one expert notes, he saw himself as a hero in his own story. To him, murder wasn't evil. It was a necessity. A forensic psychologist. He saw people as tools. His gifts to the poor were about power, not empathy. His only fear was losing control. Escobar's obsession with legacy bordered on delusion. He commissioned biographies, posed for photos with the poor, and even planned a theme park celebrating his life. But beneath the bravado lay paranoia. He slept in different houses nightly, ate only food tasted by others, and hired lookalikes to confuse assassins. His only regret, getting caught. In a 1991 interview, he shrugged. There's a thin line between hero and criminal. I'm both. But heroes don't detonate bombs in kindergartens. Heroes don't profit from addiction. Escobar's empire left Colombia with a generation of orphans, addicts, and mass graves. The legacy of a drug war. On December 2nd, 1993, Escobar's reign ended. Cornered on a Medellin rooftop, he was shot dead by Colombian forces. But his death didn't end the war. New cartels emerged, splintered but no less violent. The Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, FARC, turned to drug trafficking, fueling a 60-year civil war. Meanwhile, the U.S. market's insatiable demand for cocaine kept the trade alive.
Colombia's Navy has seized more than 1,400 tons of narcotics in a multinational operation after uncovering a new cross-Pacific trafficking route.
In 2022, Colombia produced over 1,400 tons of coca, triple Escobar's era. Today, Escobar's myth persists. Netflix's Narcos romanticizes him. Tourists flock to his bullet-riddled Monaco building. But for survivors, the glamorization is a slap in the face. As one victim's daughter said, "They treat him like a rock star. My father's grave doesn't even have a headstone. Medellin has rebuilt, But the scars remain. Over 30,000 Colombians are still classified as disappeared, victims of Escobar's war and the chaos that followed. A Medellin resident said, "Tourists take selfies at his grave. They forget the pain. We live with scars." The danger of myths. Pablo Escobar wasn't a Robin Hood. He was a predator who weaponized poverty to shield himself. For every house he built, a family was massacred. For every peso he gave, a life was extinguished. His story isn't just about drugs or crime. It's about how inequality and corruption birth monsters, and how easily the world confuses charisma for character. As Colombia continues healing, Escobar's legacy serves as a warning. When we glorify criminals, we erase their victims. When we mistake brutality for brilliance, we perpetuate the cycle. A human rights activist. We must stop romanticizing criminals. Real heroes don't murder children. The true heroes aren't the ones with empires or armies. They're the survivors who rebuild, the activists who demand justice, and the ordinary people who refuse to let fear win. In the end, Pablo Escobar didn't defy the system. He exposed it, and that may be his most enduring crime of all.